The first episode of the Chicago Bears edition of Hard Knocks debuts this week, and we've got a good sense of who some of the on-camera stars might be based on what we've seen at training camp so far.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every day. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, we look at who some of the stars of Hard Knocks will likely be. We haven't seen the full clip in advance or anything like that. All we saw was a brief trailer on during the Hall of Fame game, but based on what we've seen at training camp practices and heard from the players and coaches, that we have a pretty good sense of who some of the bigger personalities are going to be that the HBO cameras have been around to capture. So we'll look at some of the most vocal faces and names on the defense in particular. That is definitely the more vocal side of the ball. We'll also hear about a couple of assistant coaches that you might not know that much about, but we may get to know a lot more about during Hard Knocks because of the way that they talk at practice on the sidelines. And then we'll wrap up trying to find our sort of Cinderella story here, that Hard Knocks always follows, the bottom of the roster guy, the undrafted free agent, guy who's fighting for a 53, and, you follow him all the way down to cut down day and see if he makes the team or not. I think there's a couple of strong candidates on this Bears team right now. But the way I want to start this is, we know, obviously they're going to follow Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze and some of the big obvious storylines from this offseason. That part is not so hard to predict. But I really want to get into some of the personalities here, right? The guys that, we only ever see them on the field with helmets on, and we only ever really hear them on the field when they happen to be mic'd up. And even then, we don't end up hearing that much from them. And maybe some guys will speak up a little bit at press conferences, but a lot of guys are a little bit more calm and mellow at press conferences. But when they're on the field practicing and you kind of forget that you're on camera, that there's microphones, and you're kind of just your more natural self in those situations, I think that's where we're going to see a few personalities shine that we might not have expected otherwise. So first, I want to play for you what Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards said when they were asked about who they think would be the star or the personality that stands out the most to them to be on Hard Knocks this week.
Who on this team is most likely to be the star of Hard Knocks?
Get on to my guy, too. I'm going to let him answer that question.
Right. I appreciate that. No, I got no idea. I think, D-Walk is always a high contender for that. But I don't know. We got some characters on this team, so it'll be fun, for people to see their true personalities. And I think, us just going out there through the grind of camp and seeing the guys who, still keep that energy. It's gonna be a lot of fun for sure.
So he says they're D-Walk, which is sort of his, nickname shortening of DeMarcus Walker, the defensive end, who has stepped into that starting role without Yannick Ngakoue back this year. It's Walker opposite Montez Sweat on the two defensive end spots. He has some versatility to kick inside the defensive tackle, and he's definitely been one of those guys, especially on the defensive line, being the most vocal, trash talking, really kind of pushing and prodding the opposing offense in particular. And it helps that I think he's in more of a true starting role now, as opposed to last year he was coming in, and we heard from him a couple weeks ago on the podcast, talking about how it was a learning lesson last year, trying to keep up with the pace of practice under Matt Eberflus and kind of getting his feet under him in Chicago. And then he was injured through some of that at the start of training camp, right? So he never really got off on the right foot. But this time around, he seems to be a lot more comfortable here, and obviously just with himself and hoping to get back to a higher level of production as a result. And we got a good sense of his personality and a moment that I'm sure is going to be captured in Hard Knocks, whether it's in the first episode or not, we'll see. But I'm sure we'll get to see behind the scenes and a lot more detail on a moment at training camp last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now. The days kind of blend together here, where the defense was prodding and chirping and poking the offense over and over. And finally, the offense pushed back, and there was a little bit of a shoving match with DeMarcus Walker and some of the offensive players, and Caleb Williams ends up, I think, getting in there a little bit. And DeMarcus Walker was asked about that afterward, and you can hear his personality just like coming through in this clip from the press conference. And you can imagine if this is what he's willing to do in front of the media with microphones and cameras on, imagine what he's doing at practice when maybe he's not thinking about the camera and the attention that's on him.
We always hear you jawing back and forth with the offense. Did you kind of get the reaction today that you've been looking for over the past couple of years when they started jawing back a little bit?
Yes, I did. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. You know, because they're the little brother, you know what I'm saying? And then you picking on them, you want them to swing back, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I do that. And that's the thing about my leadership. You know, I try to get to know the offense and special teams as well. You know what I'm saying? I'm a team leader, not just a leader. You know what I'm saying? To, you know, being able to, you know, get to those moments, you know, being their brother, you know what I'm saying? And also being there, you know, being a bully, knowing how to, like, you know, get to know them. And when you're doing all that stuff, when things hit the fan, you know what type of person you're going to get out of them. You know what I'm saying? So, bullying works.
Obviously, a little tongue-in-cheek with the bullying works there, but right, that to me looks like a personality that if I'm HBO, I've been having the cameras and microphones pointed his direction as much as possible without, you know, trying to make it too obvious or too heavily focused on one player, but definitely a name that I'm expecting to see a lot from there. I imagine some of the defensive backs as well, Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson, we are both like quieter to the media, but on the field we've seen and heard them during games really being loud and getting in guys' faces. Jaquan Brisker as well. I think a lot of the DBs will be vocal on this. And then during the Hall of Fame game, they played a clip during the football broadcast there of from this Hard Knocks, where Caleb Williams is speaking in front of the team and, you know, says his signing bonus, it was like $25.5 million or whatever. And, you know, the whole team kind of freaks out. And they cut to Tyson Bagent, like in a chair, like kind of like reacting super strongly. And I just have a feeling Tyson Bagent is going to be another one of those names that's just a camera favorite here, that we just get to unlock a little bit more of his personality as well. Because he had that quote before the Hall of Fame game as well that I don't remember what the question was, but he said he was too busy grinding his absolute face off to, you know, I forgot what they were asking about, but like he's got some personality there too. He seems like a fun guy that the cameras should love. And, you know, you always want to have multiple quarterback stories. Quarterbacks are always going to be the stars of these kind of things. So I think we'll get a lot of the stuff you'd expect about Caleb and Rome and all that stuff. I think we'll get a lot of dynamic of loud defense, quiet offense, led by DeMarcus Walker and some of the defensive backs as well being a bigger part of that loud defense. Whereas, like, you know, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, like, I'm sure they'll talk about them a lot, but like those are not expressive, dynamic vocal personalities per se. Great players, but like the personalities, I'm curious if they're able to pull more out of them than we typically see, or maybe, you know, if they can catch them a little bit more candid. It seems like DJ Moore's kind of got that like mischief, kind of sly energy to him sometime, where like he could surprise you with something. So I hope they can get something fun out of DJ Moore there in particular, because I think he could be one of the sort of like subtle, you know, a little bit more like a wink and a nod and a nudge kind of thing, you know, kind of behind the scenes, keeping things quiet, but, you know, maybe you catch him doing something that he didn't realize he was getting caught doing. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of fun players that we get to know just better than we have, even though we kind of thought we knew them. Now we'll really get to go into their personalities. That's especially going to be true for a couple of assistant coaches in particular that I think will star even more than the coordinators or maybe even the head coach themselves. We'll learn a little bit more about one guy on each side of the ball that the cameras have definitely captured doing some fun stuff at training camp. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides online therapy that's here to help you be your best self. We all have really busy schedules with, you know, kids' activities and big work projects and more. It's sometimes hard to find time for ourselves, to really take care of ourselves and make sure that we can be our best for all the people in our lives that count on us. But things like therapy are non-negotiables that are way more important than ever when you need to be able to make time for yourself. Being able to schedule it weekly in therapy is such an effective method for doing it. I do online therapy every single week, and it's a really important part of my own personal mental health regimen. That's why I recommend using BetterHelp to really be able to make sure you're taking care of yourself. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And then if that one's not the right one for you, that's fine. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So we know the players are always going to be the focus of Hard Knocks. You know, these are the people that we identify with the most, associate with the most. We get to know the most. They're the stars. They're the real, the real mentors and the people that we look up to in this sport. But I think the Bears at Hard Knocks are going to have a couple of assistant coaches in particular that maybe we don't get to know them as well in terms of like behind the scenes, getting to meet their family and their whole story and all that. Like that kind of storytelling is usually reserved more for the players. But a couple of personalities on the coaching staff that, usually your generic position coach, we don't really know the wide receivers coach, the offensive line coach, the linebackers coach. They're kind of just faces and names. I mean, occasionally it'll be somebody who's like a former coordinator or something that maybe you've heard of before, but most of the time it's a guy who's been coaching that position for a long time and, bouncing around the league, coached for a couple different teams, coached that same position, and maybe they're a former player, but they weren't like a star former player. So, you just don't really end up knowing. They kind of be faceless, nameless, kind of generic assistant coach. But I think that's going to change for us with a couple of coaches in particular. Running backs coach Chad Morton and nickelbacks coach David Overstreet II. Specifically, like he's coaching the slot cornerback because the Bears have a cornerbacks coach, a safeties coach, and a nickelback coach. I mean, they all kind of work with all of them, and they're not like super siloed, but still, he works with the defensive backs here. Two names that we might not, I don't think I've ever said David Overstreet's name on this podcast in 7 years doing it. I mean, he's new this year, but still, like in all the time of doing this podcast, I don't think his name has ever come up. We mentioned Chad Morton briefly because he came over with the Seattle Seahawks, or from the Seattle Seahawks, with Shane Waldron, but we don't really know much about them or their personalities, but evidently they've got some of the biggest personalities on the coaching staff. So here's kind of an unexpected name to explain it to us, is veteran safety Kevin Byard. We'll walk us through here. Running backs coach Chad Morton and defensive backs coach David Overstreet and their respective personalities on each side of the ball.
Who's the most trash-talking coach out there, and does Flus ever engage?
Nah, Flus don't really talk a lot of trash. The running back coach talks a lot of trash. Because, we go to the sideline, everybody's up on man, we kind of just getting hype. He always just want to walk in the huddle, you know what I'm saying? So next time he might get scooped up a little bit just to let him know, stop getting in our huddle. But, no, it's fun. I actually, he's actually my favorite offensive coach, honestly, just because of that. Just that, the energy that he brings every single day. And that's what you want, man. As a team, it's not just about offense, defense. You kind of want to be able to mingle around and stuff like that. So it's just fun. And you need that during training camp because it gets long. So you want to be able to just have some fun throughout.
Is David Overstreet like an extension of the defensive backs? Because he seems something louder than you guys.
Pretty much. Sometimes you think that he's going to throw some shoulder pads or throw a helmet on and go out there with us. I feel like DB coaches need to be the loudest coaches on the whole entire team. That's just the swag that we bring. Want to be able to talk trash. Don't want nobody to catch the ball on us. But, yeah, it's definitely exciting.
So I think it helps that Overstreet himself is a former defensive back, played safety at the University of Missouri, and actually signed with the Chicago Bears as an undrafted free agent long ago. I mean, like 2006 or 7. I mean, not a guy that anyone I would expect to remember being on this team. Ended up playing for mostly, I think it was just the Bears, and then kind of maybe bounced around a little bit, but started getting into coaching and got into the NFL with Matt Eberflus in Indianapolis as just like a defensive assistant, quality control type guy, and ended up following Eberflus here as, again, like end of the coaching staff bench assistant, and then worked his way up to now working with the nickelbacks under John Hoke as the cornerbacks coach. And certainly has helped with the development of guys like Tyreek Stevenson and Kyler Gordon, and now Jalen Johnson's obviously having some of the best time of his career. But him being a defensive back himself, like he gets it the way Kevin Byard described there, right? Like that's DB's got to talk. Like that's just how they are. You got to have that personality to really be at your best at that position. I don't think the same is necessarily true at running back. I feel like we get a lot of running backs that speak softly and carry a big stick. I think back to David Montgomery, even DeAndre Swift now is a little bit quiet. Khalil Herbert, a little bit more on the quiet side. Like you can be, Jordan Howard was on the quiet side, like Matt Forte even. I mean, a lot of history of running backs being, they'll run hard, and on the field they're not going to be quiet about how they run, but like they're more or less a little bit more tame, types of people there. But so it's interesting because Chad Morton was a running back and I think a kick returner himself. It played in the NFL primarily as a return guy with the New Orleans Saints, and then I think he was with the Jets and the Washington football team and the Giants for a few years, right around this same time, like early 2000s, but gets into coaching, ends up actually coaching for the Packers a little bit at the beginning of his career, then spent the last almost decade in Seattle. Came to Seattle in 2014 and then was there until 2023. So is that 9 years? Or I guess if you count 14 as zero. Anyway, the year math is tough, and then comes over to Chicago with Shane Waldron this year. But a guy who, like he said, like they've been having to try and keep him out of getting into the defensive huddle, like just super involved, loud, boisterous running backs coach. And it would seem to be a shame if HBO doesn't properly capture Chad Morton's involvement in talking trash with the players, and of course, David Overstreet being that sort of vocal DB who wants to put on the helmet and pads and get back out there if he could and play with these guys. So like that to me, I think is going to be two names that we don't know now really well at all, but they have a real opportunity to become. They're not going to be the stars, right? HBO is not going to focus this Hard Knock season on the running backs coach and the nickel backs coach. But as we get to know some of these running backs, DeAndre Swift coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles, and we heard about him a little bit during the Giants version of Hard Knocks. Like there's kind of a Hard Knocks storyline continuation here of the Giants were interested in Swift, and the Bears ended up getting him. Then we'll get to know their coaches as well. Like it's still going to be about the players, and obviously mostly about Caleb Williams and I'm sure Rome Odunze in there as well. But like, I hope that we get some extra color added to the storytelling here of like, hey, also there's a fun running backs coach and nickel backs coach that if we go through the whole season, we don't get to see their excitement and energy, I feel like we will have missed something, and that HBO wouldn't have properly captured the sights and sounds of Chicago Bears training camp the way that we're all experiencing it if you get the chance to go. We will also certainly get one of those storylines where there's an end of the roster guy who's fighting for his job, fighting to keep his career going, and we'll get to hear his whole background story and all about him, and then we'll follow him all the way through cut down day, and he'll have that meeting with the coach where he either makes the team or he doesn't make the team, and our hearts are either broken or we're going to fall in love with some kind of underdog story. And I want to go through a few of the top candidates for that role on the Chicago Bears Hard Knocks next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. I wish you could bet on Hard Knocks storylines on FanDuel, because I think we could do a pretty good job of making ourselves some good money on what's going to be in these episodes. But hey, you can use the knowledge you gain from Hard Knocks and all of your football knowledge to bet on Bears Titans in Week 1. You could bet on the Bears' next preseason game as well, plus over/under on Caleb Williams' passing yards and Rome Odunze's receiving yards, odds for Caleb Williams as Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Matt Eberflus as NFL Coach of the Year. Plus, you can still bet on the baseball season that we're right in the middle of, golf, tennis, soccer. Even though it's a slower time in the sports calendar, FanDuel is making it fun for you all summer long, because FanDuel is hooking up every customer with a boost or a bonus every day. That's right. There's something for everyone daily throughout the rest of the summer. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We're going to fall in love with some underdog on this Chicago Bears roster. And I think we've already started falling in love with this underdog. But I'm curious because of the timing of, okay, right, HBO is filming stuff at training camp and they have to get an episode ready to come out on Tuesday. And so at some point you have to cut off like, okay, what's going to be in episode 1? The first 7 or 8 or 10 days of training camp. But all right, everything after that we got to save for episode 2 and beyond. So I don't know if we're going to get much of the laying the foundation of the Colin Johnson story yet in episode 1, because the Colin Johnson story didn't become a big story until the Hall of Fame game last week on Thursday. And I don't know if Thursday is enough time to get things turned around for an episode to come out on Tuesday, or if they'll have to kind of save that and start laying the groundwork afterward, because he seems to be clearly right now the front runner. If I'm setting FanDuel odds for Hard Knocks, I would put Colin Johnson as the betting favorite to be the end of the roster guy that they follow through and really kind of go into his background. We'll meet his family. They'll talk to his high school or college coaches. Right? We'll learn about his whole journey to the Bears, and then we'll follow him intimately throughout his time with the Bears. And then we'll get that meeting at the end of training camp where he's in Matt Eberflus's office and he either gets cut or he gets informed that he's going to make the team, because we saw Colin Johnson have a huge game in the Hall of Fame game, some big catches, and most importantly, maybe for the Hard Knocks perspective, was afterwards. After the game, because he had a big game, he got to meet with the media and answer questions. He was one of the stars of the game, and that's a cool thing for a bottom-of-the-roster wide receiver to get to do. And after he finished answering questions, and it was like, all right, you're good to go, before getting off the podium, he said, hey, actually, there's one more thing I want to share. And you can hear, like, he's going to talk a lot about his faith and his religion here, but to me, it's more about the emotion. You can hear him get a little bit choked up, and I think you lose a little bit of something when it's on video like this, but, like, you can really tell, like, how much all of this means to him. Like, he's kind of holding back tears a little bit here as he delivers this final unprompted remark that he just wanted to make sure he included for himself.
Thank you. One more thing. For me, it's just, with my journey, just with, a lot of injuries and just having to be patient. My goal tonight was just to give God glory in everything I did. I'm a man of faith. Everything I did tonight, I just wanted to give God praise. So every single touchdown, I got on a knee. I pointed to him because he deserves all the praise. And, people are telling me how good of a game I had, but it's absolutely nothing without my faith in Jesus Christ. So I just want to give him all the glory. Super emotional in the locker room because I've had such a long journey. It's my first time getting in the end zone since 2020. I had to sit out a whole year in 2022 after I tore my Achilles. And I just kind of been through on the injury bug a little bit. But I never stopped working. I never stopped keeping the faith. And I'm just going to build off this and keep working. Everything I do, my goal is to give God glory. So me having this opportunity, being on the podium, I just feel it's only right to do that. So I just want to say thanks to God. So
we know playing football means a lot to all the players, right? But you can just hear a little something extra in Colin Johnson there. And the fact that you pair that with having the big game and otherwise having some good training camp practices, and it seems like a prime candidate for HBO to really go in depth on. Briefly on the background of his story, he's a 5th-round pick by the Jaguars in 2020. He was a wide receiver at Texas. Obviously, we know he's 6'5", big-bodied, outside kind of vertical receiver. Makes a couple plays, catches a few balls there his rookie season in Jacksonville. Year 2, cut at the end of training camp. All right. Claimed on waivers by the Giants, said, all right, 5th-round pick, big wide receiver. Let's go and grab him. This is now 2021. Hangs around for that first season a little bit. Doesn't have a ton of production, but is at least, on the team. Goes into year 3 with the Giants, tears his Achilles in the preseason, misses all of 2022, and then comes back for 2023, cut short of, released at the end of training camp. Bears put him on their practice squad last season, spent all season on the Bears practice squad, and now back with the Bears for this year's training camp. So, really trying to get back into his career and make something happen for himself, and is clearly making something happen for himself, and is obviously very emotionally invested in all this that would make him a really strong candidate to be one of those guys that HBO follows. A couple other names I want to throw out there, though, because they'll usually kind of focus in on one, but maybe we'll get more than one, and maybe it's not going to be Colin Johnson, but I would throw out a current undrafted rookie free agent, not just because Johnson's played in the NFL a little bit. He's been around the block a little bit, but sometimes they like a true rookie so they can follow him from college and trying to catch up. Cornerback Reddy Stewart out of Troy, undrafted this year, has been playing a lot in the slot. Has a couple of interceptions at training camp practices, including of Caleb Williams, I believe, with the first team defense. So like one of these guys who's making plays and is in the mix for that backup nickelback job, coached by David Overstreet, one of the other coaches. So you can kind of see some natural connections here from, if you're thinking from a TV producer storylines here. Okay, here's the boisterous coach, and here's the player we can follow, and maybe the connection between those two is something we can play out. Like, I could easily see that being something they lean into strongly there, because Stewart's been one of the other big kind of the undrafted rookie free agents who are actually like current rookies, undrafted free agents. He's probably been the biggest standout performer at practice so far. I mean, a couple other guys have, made plays here or there, but he's the one that kind of jumps out to me. Them or one of the defensive linemen. Is it Jamari Croma, the undrafted free agent out of James Madison? There's the defensive tackle, Keith Randolph Jr. out of Illinois, who a lot of people thought would be drafted. They also have Deshaun Mallory from Arizona State, but I don't think he's done a ton personally at practice. And I'm sure we'll get a lot of like Austin Booker and a lot of the rest of the rookie class there. Maybe Byron Cowart after having an undrafted, or after having a strip sack forced fumble in the preseason game, but he's a 28-year-old veteran. It's not like this super big underdog story there. So I put my money on Colin Johnson as the betting favorite there, followed by Reddy Stewart. It's probably going to be my next top mix, and then one of the defensive linemen. Maybe one of the linebackers like Carl Jones or Paul Moala, but I don't know. I really think the Colin Johnson story is kind of writing itself for them, and again, HBO can kind of take the bird in the hand here and tell a really good, powerful story about him. So I think it all puts together what should be a really fun season of Hard Knocks. We'll get the Caleb stuff that we want. We'll get the personalities that we want. We'll get the underdog, story and follow-along storylines that we want. Like, it should be just a little bit of everything. And if we can pull a little bit more personality out of some of the guys that we don't normally get much personality from, DJ Moore, Tevin Jenkins, Cole Kmet's got a pretty good personality. But, like some of these different guys across the roster that we don't always get, like, energy or, like, jokes from, but they got to have it in there. Behind the scenes, when they don't think anyone's watching or they forget the cameras are on. Like, I want to see a lot of those moments. Help humanize some of these guys a little bit more and bring up more of their personality than we ever realized along the way. The Hard Knocks episode debuts Tuesday night, so you can be sure we're going to break down all the things we learned from that episode on the Wednesday podcast this week on Locked On Bears. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each day. If you want a second listen, we've got plenty of Locked On podcasts for all of your favorite sports teams across the major professional sports. Whether it's another Chicago team or in another city, we've got you covered with your local expert on your team every day. And when you come back for another episode of Locked On Bears tomorrow and each day this week, you can be sure I'll always leave you with another opportunity to bear down.